Hi, and welcome back to Fixer Upper. This is Griglock from the Kyber server, and today we have a special guest, Maetrim from Kenneth. And Maetrim, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Doing well. So I really appreciate you hopping on today to talk to us about the Builder tool, and specifically the new version of the Builder tool that's coming out soon.
Yes, it's been taking up a lot of my time recently.
Well, I think both myself and a large portion of the community really appreciate the work that you put into the tool. Before we hop into the tool itself, what was your original motivation to kind of dive in to create this?
Uh, Back in the day, the first version, the builder tool I used to use was the Ron's Character Planner, the very early version, and I sort of applied to help develop that. But I was a bit dismayed by the code quality and the setup and things like that at the time, and I thought I can do this better. And I used a couple of his data files as my first step, and I just jumped in and tried to do it, and that eventually became version one. And then towards the end of version, before I started version two, I was thinking I've made a real mess of this, and I decided to rewrite it from scratch to get rid of all the defects that I figured out because it just built organically from the first version, and I've sorted out an awful lot of the things that are wrong in the background, which I couldn't really afford to do in version one.
Well, I think both myself and quite a few other players owe you some autos boxes for all the builds that you saved us from playing because we got to flesh them out in the planner first.
It helps
So
an awful lot.
really appreciate this tool. What can you tell us about the tool overall? So what's your primary goal for it?
I'm trying to get it to so you can actually plan any type of build correctly, hopefully get the correct numbers out, and ideally in the future for version two, it's going to have things like DPS meters and things like that. So I'm trying to cover all the bases that any player could possibly want to consider a build about. And so yeah, it's a matter of putting everything in that you can think of mostly.
So for folks who have used version one of the builder, I know you mentioned you wanted to restart from the ground up to really improve upon what was version one. What are some of the new features that version two is going to offer?
Well, version one allowed you to only have, well, you could have different build files open, but it was just a single build at level cap, and that was it. And it only supported gear from level 20 to 32 because there was just too much of it. In version two of the builder, you can now choose to plan your build at any level, and then you can have multiple copies of the same build at different levels, so you can work out how it would play at level 4, level 8, or any level in between. And then you can also include multiple build or lives in the same file, so you could track how your progress is going. So you could say this: when I was a warlock, I was this build; when I was a fighter, I was this build, etc. Um, and it's trying to make it more organically, so the way you would actually use it, compare it to the game, because only planning it at a fixed level is not enough for a lot of people because they want to actually see how the build will progress as you play it. And I mean, if you look at some Streamtom's build repositories, when he does his presentation of it, he would say, "Well, this build it has up to about level 8. The enhancements are set up like this, and then they change at that level to something else." And you can't really mirror that in the version one of the builder. Whereas this, you can have the build actually set up at level 8 with all the correct enhancements set up, and say, "Oh, it changes here," and then you can switch to the build at level 9 and you can see how it all changes. So it allow people to share their builds and how they level a lot better is one of the things that I aimed at. Um, I've also looked into increasing the number of breakdowns and making those more informative. So uh, it will actually try and notify you if you've got things that are not stacking now by highlighting the items with non-stacking items in it. Um, Yeah, and of course there's all the gear from levels 1 to 32, which is all the named items out of the wiki, uh, which used to be a pain to create for version 1, but now there's tools actually in the software to download those from the DDO wiki, which people put the information in, and then it will automatically create the items for me. And then, although the parser is not 100%, I would then go in and just fix up the little bits that are not quite right in each of the items. So it's a lot quicker to maintain the items. And also compared to version 1 is none of the classes and things are hard coded. So it's very easy to add a race and a new class. You could just actually, if you wanted to say invent your own class or race, you could create a file based off one of the existing ones. Or you could say take the halfling file, rename it, call it Kobold, chuck it in the same directory, and it would automatically appear in the software as a selectable race. And then you could fill out all the other bits and pieces. So it's very easy to maintain. So adding things like Eladrin and Eladrin Chaos Master, I just put in 2 race files, and I put in the relevant racial trees, and I had to go in and adjust a few of the other data files to make sure that they were compatible, to say you can select this as a Chaos Master or as a Wild Mage, etc. And everything just filters across quite nicely. So it's much easier from my point of view to maintain, to keep it up to date with the game changes, which is one of the things that's a pain in the butt to deal with.
So if I was going to create a new build from scratch, actually, let's do that here. Let's just. So this loads us up right at the beginning here. What's the first thing that you would typically do if you were making a build?
Um, I would normally go straight to my classes to myself. So I say, oh, I'm making one of these, and at this point, it doesn't really matter what race you've got. You might be forced to do your alignment changes first because of class selections. But other than that, I'd probably go straight to the class selection. So this has been reworked slightly so that the archetypes are listed directly underneath the individual classes that they're archetypes of, compared to version 1. Although I think I retrofitted this as a feature to version 1 as well to keep it the same. Um, and it will also tell you why you can't select classes, because a lot of people, because previously in version 1 it just wouldn't show you the class, and people go, well, you haven't got Bard in this software, what's wrong? And now it says, oh, well, you're the wrong alignment to select a Bard. So I've tried to put in features that enable people to figure out what's going wrong with their selection process, ideally here.
So if I wanted to say look at my stats, my tomes, that page. So I noticed the general layout's a little bit different for this version of the builder. How would I pull that screen up?
So there's usually a couple of ways. I mean, if it's already visible, in this particular case, you've got the past lives and special feats tab, which you could click on. But if it's not displayed as a toolbar button for each individual view available up on the top, and you can also get it via the view menu, I believe. So there's a toggleable options. So the top option, and you can get a list of the individual panes that you can switch on and off. Um, Unfortunately, there is a bug in this version, or I should say, the classes that I based this software on. That if you float a window, things can go wrong, and the whole software just stops responding for some reason. I've spent like 20 hours trying to figure out what's wrong in the base classes that are provided by Microsoft. I haven't managed to get to a solution yet. So keeping everything docked is the best way to use the software at the moment. If you float a window, and you get affected by this bug, the easy thing is you have to kill it via Task Manager and start again, unfortunately. But as I say, I've been trying forever to try and figure out that bug.
Okay.
Yep.
So you had mentioned earlier that one of the new features is that you could build by level. So how would I do the level breakdown in here?
Okay, so you've got the very left, on the left-hand side, you've got, it says Life 1, it says Build 1. If you left-click the build, you will get a pop-up menu that allows you to select the level you want to plan at. And the builder will respond like it's limited to a maximum of 6 levels in this particular case. If you go to enhancements, the actual requirements for using an enhancement are level gated as well. So you'll see that you can't pick the top row of enhancements because you have to be level 12 to select those. So everything is limited for that. But if you then wanted to say, I now want to plan this build 4 levels higher, if you were to click the Add Build button, you will get a copy of the current build inserted underneath, and then you could say, oh, and then change it to level 12, and it's sorted. So you could then progress the build through the levels.
And then
And
every snapshot, that's also updating the gear as well.
yes, well, you've got a copy of the same gear. It would copy the gear across to the next level, but then at that point you could actually change it to what that gear you have at that particular level. So you can just keep doing that, and the builds are automatically sorted by levels. So if you were to then add a new build and then say go to level one, it will get put at the top of the list for that particular life. So yeah, if you were to change that one or change level one to level 32, it would then be put at the bottom of the list, etc. So it tries to keep them all in level order for you.
It automatically preserves them. That's really awesome. So I think you were pointing to some of the Strimtom builds, but I can think of, a lot of caster builds. If you're a DC caster, you're not necessarily playing as a DC caster for your first few levels. You're going to take a lot of damage SLAs to level up with, or
Yes.
I think tank can be an infamous example where if you're playing a tank build, uh, unless you hate yourself, you're probably not actually leveling it as a tank.
Yes. I can
So
imagine.
that's great. And then so I know that you were experimenting with it on the forums a few weeks ago, in terms of how the output looks.
Yes.
Um, so what can you tell us if I fully fleshed out a build by level, like this, is the forum breakdown going to also be by level?
So it will only the form export is actually only for the build you've got selected. So if you've got the build at level one selected, you get the form export for that build. And if you select the build for level 12, you get the form export for level 12. But I mean, if you actually popped up the dialogue for it, I don't know if people know most of the features in here. Um, you've got the items on the left that can be exported. You can turn them off individually if you're not interested in them. You can also reorder them as to the order they appear in the export for you. Um, so, for example, if you're not interested in past lives, you can move it up and down the list. You can turn it off and get rid of it entirely, so uh, it doesn't appear in the output that's copied to the clipboard for you. Um, and there's unfortunately it's not very human readable at the moment, so I'm going to have a version that's human readable and a version that's forum readable, eventually side by side.
Yeah, I think that's great. And when I saw how you were formatting the output for the forum post, I got really excited because it looks really good in the new format.
Yeah, it was a lot of effort to figure out how to get all the tables and the information to go in for like all the gear and your what you've got selected. Hopefully, I was going to add the set bonuses. There's little tables underneath all your gear sets for any set bonuses that you've got. Not got round to it yet, unfortunately. It's just there's so many different ideas floating around in my head for it.
Okay, so you can make a build now. You can make a build by level. You can change the gear by level, which I think is awesome. I think a lot of us who have played the game for 10 years plus, we kind of have those gear sets laid aside, but a newer player I think would really benefit from knowing, well, how did you level this thing up?
Yes.
Um, what other features are new to the builder?
Um, so if you've got a spell selection is what if you select a spell that does damage, it will and hover over the spell now. It will give you approximations of the damage that you're currently doing with your spell powers. So it'll try and give you a breakdown of that. I'm hopefully going to extend this to have all the DC calculations in there as well. Haven't quite got round to that point yet. Um, so it's giving you a good DC, a damage approximation. So you could try and optimize for that. Um, Also, it should hopefully eventually track things like caster levels of spells. So you've got a max caster level of like a 10 for fireball normally, but you can have feats that would increase that, and it would show you that in the damage. And hopefully, I'll have all that information also uh, being displayed in the tooltips as well. It's just as I say, there's so much data to try and figure out ways of it tracking it that make it all very complicated.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions actually. So, having made the builder tool now, and I think I asked you this when you were a guest on the DDO cast as well, but how much of the game would you say resides in your brain at this point, just from all these breakdowns?
Well, it will reside for a while and then it gets discarded. So I will. I mean, I had a question about Sacred Fists coming up on the board the other day because you get granted a feat at level 1 and level 6, and somebody was saying, well, you can select Fists of Light, and I ended up actually creating a character on live to see whether you could select Fists of Light, and you can't because I think he was actually mistaking Fists of Light for Follower of the Path of Light, which is what you get at level 1. And eventually, I think that's what we figured out. That's what it is. And I double checked everything else was working in that area, and fine, you do get it. But yeah, he also made me have to completely rework how follower feats work because Sacred Fist can select a follower feat as a regular feat, whereas cleric can only select it as a specific feat type. And so it's like getting follower feats to go into a standard feat slot I had to rework how all that stuff worked to get that to work. And the build on my machine here actually supports it all fully. But I've got a list of about 30 different changes I've done to the builder since the version you're actually displaying here.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Where do you find all the time to work on this?
Oh, weekends I haven't got much else to do because I play in a static group during the week. In if you follow Bracker on the streaming, I'm in his group usually from there. But he only streams DDO Monday to Friday. So at the weekend he's doing Warhammer and things like that. It's a good plug for him. Follow him if you're interested in that kind of stuff. But because he doesn't play at the weekend and we have to stay at the same level, um, I have lots of spare time to do other things. So I also, when I'm waiting for him, I usually spend like an hour most evenings tinkering with bits and pieces and fixing bugs that have been reported by people. Which I must express to people: please report any bugs that you see because I can't check it all.
Actually, that brings me to another really good question. Where is the best place for people to, if they find a bug, where should they tell you?
So the two best places are the GitHub repository. If you've got a GitHub account, you can go straight to it, post a specific issue, and put the details in. You can attach files and things. So if a specific build is having a problem, it's very easy for me to get the data that's needed because you can attach those files directly. The other option is to describe it in a post in the relevant forum, the forum entry, so the DDO Character Planner 2 thread. So if you post into there, I mean, Calibano has been doing an awful lot in the last week or so. He's been giving me hundreds and hundreds of bugs to fix, which has been very nice. And he's also got links to all the files that he's having trouble with. So I've got lots of data to work with, but putting links into the forum to external data is not something that's really properly supported unless you're exposing them all. So if you need to attach data, do it via GitHub because you can actually just drag and drop files into your issues and they'll be available there.
That's great. What do you think is the one feature for the builder that you'd like to add, but currently seems a little far out?
That would be a DPS meter. So I've got planned that once you've any particular attack type like a cleave, smite, etc., will be able to be selectable as a list, and you can then create an attack chain. So you can say, I will do a cleave one, a greater cleave, followed by a smite, followed by this, followed that, and all the different attacks you're going to do, uh, including like Epic Destiny's special attacks. And you can put those into a list and say, that's my attack rotation, and each one will calculate its amount of damage you do. And I need to have it precise timings on how many attacks you can do in a minute via all these things, and then from that I'll get an average score for your DPS per minute, and from that per second, effectively, so that people who do DPS builds can give have a way of rating them against each other. But that's, I mean, somebody on the forums actually said to me, "Don't do this; it will drive you mad." Trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I agree with them. There's so many factors, and attack animations and the speed of that
It's
is,
different from race to race and weapon to weapon. So what data is available on the forums for that, I've already got a copy of. I don't. If you looked in the data files folder, there's a thing called attack speeds.xml, which is my initial data dump. which is not currently loaded or don't do anything with it, but it's there for future. So eventually it's going to come into the builder to hopefully do that. And I also need to be able to have things like snapshotting so that you, for example, can say, I switch to my prowess date set or a particular filigree set, do a snapshot with your trance, and then use those values for the DPS calculations and things. So yeah, it's all going to get very complicated.
Well, I appreciate that you're at least starting to think about that in the future.
Yeah,
I know that there's been a lot of attempts at good DPS calculators, especially for range damage as well. For a while, there was a ranking of the various range builds from the Artificer to, like a Ying's bow build to the
shurikens and things like
Shurikens, yeah. So it was interesting to see how the numbers broke down. I think what I've always walked away with is nobody gets it precisely spot on accurate, but it's so directionally accurate you can tell the good builds from the bad ones at
yeah.
least.
I mean, even if I was only like 95% accurate on that, it would still give a good, hopefully, course ranking for everybody to say yes or no, it's a goer or not, or I'm getting like a 2% improvement from doing this, or etc.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I use this tool. I've been using version one for a long time, but when we do the Fixer Upper show, typically I'll have someone on to review a build, to whether it's a first life build or an end game Reaper 10 build, and breaking things down to share with other players in your builder tool makes it very easy to communicate the essence of the build. So.
Mhm.
Um, with that being said, I have thousands of builds from the version 1. What's going to happen to all those when version 2 comes out?
Okay, so version 2 actually supports an import feature. So if you go to the file menu, there's an import of V1 file, and you can go browse for those files, and it will do its best to import these. Now, this is sort of in late beta, so I mean, you can give it a go, and away it will go. Try its best to import a particular file. So there's some issues of enhancements coming in because, unfortunately, I've renamed things from version 1 to version 2. So it's possible you can get an enhancement which has got the right internal name, but the selection option has changed by it, like instead of being called damage boost, it's called haste boost or something like that. So you end up with an enhancement that says it's selected but has no icon being shown. So I've got to figure out a way to handle that for the translations. Uh, and I've been sort of been teetering with the idea of doing a pop up for those particular ones, saying, "Hey, we've got a problem here. What should the real selection be that I've currently messed up on the import?" And it will prompt you to actually select the correct names during the process. Yes, you can see it's happened in your falconry there, in your falconry tree, halfway up in the middle. So you've got the falconry go for the eyes, so that the actual enhancement name, the internal name, every enhancement's got a specific name, which might be like falconry go for the eyes, but the selection that you've got is based off the text of the item that you're hovering over. And if that text has changed, you end up with a case like this where uh, it's disappeared. So you've managed to fix it by saying revoke it, select the correct name. So you're okay to do that. But if it can actually happen on the core item one in the bottom left hand corner, which means you'd have to revoke the entire tree before you could actually do it. So I want to have a way to fix those in the future. So I mean, it's got about 95% of your import here correct from version one. Um, but that every time somebody tries it with a new file, usually something else comes up onto the list to try and fix to get it to work properly. And Caliban has been doing that with his build list, and he's provided me with a shed load of bugs to fix in that particular regard. And so this is a lot more robust than it was, but it's still not quite 100% yet from version one. But you can get the most of your build in, which is good.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, and I did notice that it untoggled some of the stances too, but again, that's easy enough to fix.
Yes, currently those are not restored, so you have to switch those back on manually. It's something I intend to. It will import the stances as well. It's all available there. Just haven't got around to adding that into the list of things to do yet.
So one question that I had from someone, knowing that I was going to have you on, this particular individual has a large monitor. So any thoughts on ever doing a UI scaling feature?
I've thought about it. It's difficult. So a lot of my UI is based on the icons that come from the game. So scaling those up, I mean, for example, if you took the enhancement tree, I could say scale it up by 50%. Um, I would have to, I mean, I could stretch them all and change it all and get that to work probably quite well for certain things, but for others, it's difficult. Um, the UI does scale to a certain extent based off your Windows settings. So if you were to right click on your desktop and change the default font size between small, medium, and large, the UI will do its best to reflect that. So it will switch fonts and things. Although I haven't tested that recently in version 2. I know it does it fairly well in version 1. Certain things will probably scale, but not anything that currently has icons in it. So it's tricky. Um, at some point, I'm going to put. I might have a go at putting that kind of features in, but it's as I say, it's a tricky thing to deal with. It's the same with dark mode. I mean, there is a dark mode that's partially implemented. So I've done some initial work on it. So if you went to the view menu, you could actually try switching it on here, and it went to appearance and look. There's the dark style just under the blue that's selected. So I've started making these work. So some of the screens you're currently got white text on black, where before it would have just it would still been the previous color coding. So um, I'm in the process of converting it to supporting the dark style, but there's lots of places where I haven't quite got everything working properly.
I think that's great. I did notice a couple things. One, the artifact has some additional slots now, it looks like.
Well, yeah, this is just me future proofing. So I don't know how many artifact slots are going to be supported in the future. So I just assigned a certain amount of space, and I could fit 10 in. So I'll let you support 10. It's up to you to keep to how many you've actually got in the game. I have thought about putting data in on the artifacts to say you've got a maximum of X number of slots to make sure people don't do things like that. Um, but yeah, we also support up to 20 filigrees as well for the main part. So you've got the drop list at the top, and you can say, actually, I've got 20 filigree slots. So this is just me future proofing the builder for any changes that happen in the game itself.
I just noticed you regrouped all the filigrees too to make them really easy to find.
Well, I actually had a bug report on this because people don't know which pack certain filigree sets come from. But previously, if it was a combo list, it was incredibly long and difficult to find things on. And if it was a menu, the menu could be so tall that you couldn't actually fit it on the screen, and it was scrollable. So this was probably a nice go between to allow you to find what you're looking for based off which pack they came from.
Yeah, I mean, I would say even if you don't know exactly which expansion the filigree you're looking for came from, there's not that many categories to choose from. Just quickly scroll through the list. It's
And it,
alphabetical.
it does give you an idea of where to go to find them as well. So you have to go to Ravenloft content to get these ones, and Saltmarsh to get these ones, etc.
That was always one of my favorite things about what you did with the gear planner too, is that it actually tells you exactly where the item drops from,
Mhm.
which I thought was quite nice.
That's one of the things that I do find useful. I mean, internally, like I don't. Is this the version with the gear weapons that tells you the weapon breakdowns properly? Yes. So it's got the critical rolls and ranges and things. That's been recently added. Um, One of the things that a lot of gear has is augments. So things like dinosaur augments are in an individual file, but you might find that you have an item that has specific augments to that item only. And it used to be the way I did it was I'd add some generic augments and say I've got a special augment slot called it might be called something like what's it, adamantine knuckles slot 1 or something like that. And what I do now is the item itself contains its own information about what special augments can go in its special slots. So if you have certain types of items that have like hundreds and 150 different things that could go it, it's all built into that one file only for the selections for that item. So it doesn't bog down the rest of the system. It's just for that item. But it means I have to go fill them all out manually, unfortunately, because that's not generated automatically for me by the software at the moment.
One of the other things I did notice when you had me clicking on the levels earlier is that, again, some future building, it looks like you do allow it to go up to level 40 for the character too.
Yes, you can actually switch it to level 40 now. So if you actually went to the class and levels, you could actually scroll it down all the way to level 4. So in theory, you could plan the additional um, feats that you select, but we're missing all the new feats that the game is currently going to add. So this is just me allowing myself to make sure it won't fail if you actually went to level 40. Um, yeah, so it's just support for me for that. So uh, things should work up top to plan with that extra information.
And I didn't see the screen yet. Swapping around. Which is the screen for the tomes again? Where you add in the
Okay,
tomes?
you've actually got it hidden because of your screen layout because you haven't got much space. It's actually I think it's between the builds and the stances. So if you were to grab the left hand side of the stances pane, I think you can drag it across to the right, and I think you've actually grabbed the builds one, and then you can actually see it. It's hidden away in there
Oh, okay, I see. It is here.
because you've actually compacted your area, so you can't quite see all of that information.
Let's move stances over. There we go.
Yeah, so you've actually been doing some typing in the background.
I've revealed my push to talk key to the world. All right. So we have our stats, we have our tomes. You can name it. You can include the guild buffs, which is nice.
Yep.
Um, Anything else that we should know about using the builder? Any tips or tricks that you have for us that a layperson may not realize the first time they use it?
Oh, could you go to the skills pane? It's yeah. So in this particular one, green are your class skills and things. So you can to spend your skill points. There's quick ways of doing it. So if, for example, you want to just max your jump skill, you can just click the word jump on the left hand side, and it will just go. Okay, there you're done. And if you want to revoke them all, you can just right click it and it'll go away. You can click at individual locations to train at those if you want to. Yeah. Um, if you don't want to bother with it at all, there's an auto buy in the top left hand corner, and based on your class skills, your class, it generates a list of skills in order to say, oh, buy these ones for you. And then you might say, I've got initially set up, and then you can revoke the ones you're not interested in and switch them to the actual skills you really want. So that you can set yourself up pretty quickly there. There's uh, one of the things that people probably don't know is if you click on the number above for given for the level, you can highlight a row. So no, if you get yeah, so if you click there, so that will highlight it. So you might find what skills I actually want to buy. You're looking at this screen and you can't quite. You keep am I level 10 or 11? So you can highlight the row you're interested in. This is something Brackart suggested to me because he was constantly using version 1 of the builder to reference during his level up, and he could never work out which skills he had to select at a given level. So you can just click on the level to highlight it for you. And there's quick ways of setting your tomes as well. If you click on the word tome, your skill tomes on the right hand side, if you, so you can apply your skill tomes all at once or individually. Right click will revoke them all. So you could a level. So a lot of places where you can do multiple select, there's options like that hidden away for you to do those.
That's great. And I have this build up. This build is a melee, but I guess there's some spell casting on it too since it has cleric levels. What are we going to notice different about the breakdowns?
Okay, so in this particular case, you've actually got some red breakdowns. So this is the builder saying you've got your build set up and you've got some non-stacking effects present. So if you were to drag the thing up so you can actually see everything that's in your list at the bottom, um, and if you go down a bit further, you've got the non-stacking effects. So you've got certain things from different places which are not stacking with things. So if, for example, you had two items that had deadly augment slotted, for example, or you had a deadly on an item and then deadly on an augment, you'd have them listed as an inactive item. You can, oh, I can change that augment out because it's not of no use to me because it's well, it's inactive because there's a different effect somewhere from somewhere else overriding it. So the builder itself is trying to let you know where you've probably got things that are not quite right in your gear. But it might be a case of, well, I've got two items slotted that both provide true seeing, so the true seeing is always going to be lit up. So yeah, you investigate and say, well, there's nothing I can do about that unless I was to change an item. But it does give you an idea as to what you could change in your build to improve things, or if you've got issues with your build. Um, Other than that, I don't know if people actually know there's a little copy icon halfway down on the screen there. If you want to actually get an export of the breakdown, that list that you've got will be put on the clipboard, so you could then paste that into a document as well. So you can list out all the things individually. So if you wanted that could then get pasted into a form post to say this is how I get my in date of 157 or whatever. Um, you can just select that and copy and paste that information in.
If it says something's not stacking, so like in this instance it's saying divine powers not stacking, is there a way to tell which thing it's saying
Okay,
it's not stacking with?
Okay, so unfortunately, you have to look up the bonus type. So that's off the right-hand side of your screen in the scroll bar. So if you got so does it tell you what the bonus type is at the bottom?
It says enhancement. Yep.
Okay, so you'd have to look at the relevant enhancement value in the upper one to say, oh, it's not stacking with this. So maybe I ought to have the ability that you click on one and it would highlight the other thing that's not stacking with. That's probably I'll put that into that as a suggestion into my notepad here. Non-stacking alternates and breakdowns. That's a possible feature in the future.
Yeah, that's great. And I saw here that you did add the modifier for stats, so
Yes.
if you didn't feel like doing the mental math on it,
Yeah. I always get it wrong myself when I do it.
-10 divided by 2 rounded down. And
Unless it's less than 10 when it's rounded up.
right. I like the breakdown for hit points that you have here. I've really enjoyed using the unconscious range, but it looks like you've added Reaper hit points in here as well.
Yes, because I mean, in version one of the builder, all all Reaper hit points always apply. Whereas these are level gated now for version 2 because you might be a level 5 character and you can only get a maximum of 50 Reaper hit points at level 5. So you might have, you know, enough Reaper points spent that you get over that. So it has to be able to cap those for level 5. So that kind of thing needs to apply. So they're to be split out.
Just kind of going through a lot of the stats. It looks like we had a lot of these in here before, which I do appreciate. Um, Anything new under the magical breakdowns?
We have to expand it out. I've got the caster levels and spell caster level stuff, but it's beginning to appear in here. Um, some of the things like extra caster levels for specific spell types probably won't appear here, but you'll be able to see it in the spell breakdowns when you hover over the spell itself. Um, so that sort of area is still under development, really. Um, one of the biggest things that was recently added was in the bard section for under songs. I now list breakdowns for all your bard songs. So you've now got the inspire greatness effects that you're generating. So if you go through in your enhancements and gain additional this, additional that, as to what your inspire greatness will buff other people with. So that's been recently added. Um, you probably don't have it in the version you've got, but under weapons now, there's a weapon enchantment which will appear. So like you might have a plus 15 weapon, but you've got enchant weapon as a past life enabled, so it goes up to +18, and then you're an artificer that increases your main hand weapon buff by +1, +2, +3, etc. So you can get up to +20 on your weapon enhancement. So that stuff has been broken out, and then the weapon breakdown will then use that properly for its attack and damage. And if you're then you've got implement in your hands, which is another thing that can be handled, where the weapon enchantment bonus works out how much spell power you additionally get. It will use that value to calculate how much additional spell power you get. So it's getting things more accurate over time. Just so much to think about.
Yeah, there's a lot. I've been meaning to because I didn't update it since I want to say 2019 or so, but I have a guide that I did that was pretty extensive on Turn Undead. So if I repost that, I'll make sure I tag you. So if there's any of that information you want to include in here too, that'd be great.
I mean, in theory, all the items that provide additional turn dice and things should all work, and it will increase your turn levels and dice, so you can actually get a good breakdown of that. But it's not an area I've done a deep dive into. I basically just build it out as I went along, and I haven't really gone in depth to see whether or not things are missing there or not. And this is where I need individual players. Like, this is the stuff I'm interested in. Where is the builder going wrong? And that provide me with where the issues are, and I can get it all fixed up. Really,
Yeah, that's all great. I mean, every improvement that you've pointed to um, is huge quality of life. I love that you can max the skills with just a single click. I think that's an amazing quality of life
but it's
upgrade.
something you could do in version 1 of the builder as well. People may not have been aware of it.
Oh, really?
Yes, so yeah, that was using a list control that had been reworked to draw the way I wanted, whereas this is actually a rewritten custom control. So if you were to switch to a build of lower levels, like level 6, for example, on the builds tab on the left hand side, you've got a level 6 wild mage. You'll see that it cuts down to only show you the levels that you've got. So a lot of the controls now will only show the information for the maximum number of levels you got up to the max heroic level.
That's great. So whenever new things come out, so I know Wild Mage just came out, but I'm already here. How many I don't want to say how many hours does it take you to put that in, but has it gotten easier to add these things over time?
Well, compared to version 1, I mean, in version 1, what I would do is I have an individual file for each enhancement tree. And then I would copy and paste it into the one big enhancements file, which meant that I had to maintain two copies of the file at the same time. So I threw away that idea in version 2. Every enhancement tree is just its own file. And so I actually have a set of blank enhancement files, which I can just copy in, paste, rename it, type in the new type names, set the requirements for it to display. And then from the point of view of getting the tree in, I actually have um, I would take screenshots of every single item from like a Lamania option. So I have screenshots of every single enhancement. I basically just type them in manually to put the text in, and then I usually copy and paste various sections to get like for example, if you're selecting an ability, so like +1 con, +1 in, or whatever, I have certain things that I can copy and paste to just put, which have the correct effects and everything already set up. I can just drop them straight in, um, and so that I can fill them out pretty quickly. But you'd end up with a tree that's got no icons in it. So what I then do is I strip out the icons individually. And I create the files, put the file name in, but you might find I always create them as a square. So I need to have ability in the builder. So if you did a shift middle click on an item, you can do this and then cancel it. If you go to particular enhancement item, do a shift middle click. So not on items, but an enhancement tree. If you do a shift middle click on an item, there's some hidden features in the builder. It says how do you want to affect this particular bitmap? So it will like make the corners transparent between a square icon and a hexagonal one for me. So I can just do a single click and the bitmap's fixed for everybody after that for the next release. And you probably want to say cancel because you don't want to change anything here. But there's also things that you can actually put an arrow in. So I think it's a control shift left click on an item will put an arrow up into that particular enhancement tree, and you can choose how long it is. So it would then also put the requirement into the enhancement it would link to 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 keep things correct in the software. So I've automated bits and pieces of this in the background. But all of these features are there, but you wouldn't normally do it yourself.
Useful if, say, you wanted to suggest an enhancement tree and create a visualization for it.
Yes. So, I mean, I tend to find that what I do is I fill out one row completely, make sure all the bitmaps are working and the effects are working. Then I put the next row in the tier one, tier two, tier three, and work my way through the list. And it might take me, if a new tree comes out, it might take me 30 minutes to an hour and a half to get an entire tree in, um, depending on how complicated it is.
Well, I'm grateful for it. I know that I don't TR into something until I've messed around with it in the builder first. That's
Mm.
now a standard for me. So I always look forward to when I check the GitHub and I say, "Oh, hey, Wild Mage is available. Looks like I can TR this weekend."
Unless I've made a mess of it.
It's not. I normally find it's good to wait a weekend or so to TR just in case there's any issues. I'll let somebody else be the tester for that.
Yeah, there's people having the wild mage past life issues with chaos months at the moment, and fortunately, I'm only working on my Eladrin past lives at the moment, so I'm all right.
Yeah, I think they fixed it now. They just have to go back and sort everyone out. So, all right. So one other thing I saw, I think in a recent forum post is, or maybe it was on the GitHub itself. You mentioned that this is compatible with the Gear Planner tool. Um,
Yes,
do you have any involvement with the creation or maintenance of the Gear Planner tool?
I have no involvement with it at all. So I basically downloaded a version of that, created a gear set in it, and exported it to a file, and then added an option that would then parse that file and create the gear set in the builder for it. And I've tested it to a certain extent, but I haven't checked it with recent versions, if any. But as long as the gear matches the names between my version of software and his version of software, and as we both do it by parsing the wiki, and the wiki defines what the names are, we should be fine into the future.
Okay, great. Well, I think we've covered a lot about the builder. We talked about feats, enhancements, level ups, how to capture those different level points. Is there anything that we may have missed about the builder, version one, version two, that you think we should know?
You can reorder enhancement trees by clicking on the icon and dragging it to a new position. You can do that in game as well. You can't do it for Epic Destinies yet, but that will appear at some point. Um, you need to, of course, select your Epic Destiny. I really need to have a select all button for all of those, so you don't have to press all 12. Um, so yes, so ideally I'd want you to be able to drag and drop them via their icons here as well, so you could actually drag it out of like the preview tree. Because at the moment you have to select the preview tree to something else before you can select it into other things. So there's some annoyances in the user interface there that I need to fix. Um, in the version I've got, which you don't have, if you right click a build on the left hand side, you have the ability to save a life as an individual file, or you can load other files in. You can copy them to the clipboard and then paste them into other documents. So those are features I got working today. Um, one of the things I also want to do in the future is because if you've got to build it like 20 different levels, it will take the actual breakdown values and save those into it. So you could actually say, how does my melee power change from level 1 to 20? And you get a little graph of how it's changing. And you could get the same for your hit points and things like that. So you could actually see how builds progress over levels without having to manually switch between them all slowly. So that's the kind of things I want to put in, so you can actually see how they change over time as well. You might find out my spell power went up from level 19 to 20, but for some reason it dropped down at level 24. Why is that? So you might be putting your gear in incorrectly, that kind of thing.
I think that'll be quite nice to just to have an understanding before you play something, exactly where the kind of pinnacle points are where it starts to feel a little more difficult, or hey, this is going to start to feel easy after
Mhm.
you get this feat.
Yeah, you're struggling up to level 7, and then at level 8, because certain things came into your build, you're suddenly Mr. Uber from Uber Town.
Yeah, a lot of multi-class builds seem to work in that way.
Mhm. Just trying to think of it. Is there any other hidden features that you wouldn't be aware of? Um, I mean, I've recently added the log to build version 2. I mean, this kind of information is probably not interested to you, but it allows me to keep track of what's going on, and actually it spams out error messages, things that are going wrong with things. So you might find that it will say, "Oh, you've got this effect set up incorrectly in the data." I mean, there's an option under development. You can say, if you were to go to the bottom, I think is it verify loaded data. You can click on it. It basically just looks at all the things and it says, "These are all the things you've got wrong or is missing." So I'm like missing images for certain set bonuses and things like that. So icons have not been set for things, and maybe I've got enhancements that are not set up correctly. So this is how I sort of debug the software. Um, so this I would then go and try and tackle those things individually. So I find the log very useful, although the fact that it pops up for everybody when you start up the software, they find that a bit annoying. Um, it was a special feature I put in because I always have access. I need access to the log all the time, but I'll probably take that out at some point because people are not interested in it. But it does show you the loading progress of the software as it's starting up, which I think is useful. The fact that the items load asynchronously in the background as well at startup means that you can actually start planning before the items have appeared. It does mean that you're sort of limited to, you can't mess around in those screens, but it's usually only about 5 or 10 seconds before you can do that. And that also stops me from allowing you to save a file during that period, because I don't know if you know anything about software, but certain things are not thread safe under certain circumstances when they're happening in the background. So I had to sort of stop bad things happening where things would interfere with each other.
I actually like having the log there. I like knowing what the known issues are, and I I'd like to think that there would be ways for us to be able to contribute to make your life easier in tracking down some of the bugs.
Mhm.
Obviously, if you get hundreds or thousands of users, uh, sort of putting their brain power to say, hey, I think this thing's not working right. Um,
Yeah. Every time I get any kind of report and look into it, I usually find there is something wrong somewhere, because I mean, there's so much data, it's ridiculous. And I only get to spend like 30 seconds looking at something as a cursory. And I mean, if you look at the releases in this last week, I've done changes and broken things without realizing it. And so, for example, anybody who opened a multi-class or had a class which had less than spells went to level 9, the whole software would just crash on them. Um, so it was like trying to figure out what was causing that kind of issue. Because I'd done a change and I'd only checked it with pure classes that took spells that allow spells up to level 9, and um, and then everybody else is having problems, like the software just randomly crashing for a warlock and things like this, because they only go up to level 6, I think it is, for spells. Um, yeah, look, there's because there's just so much. I can't guarantee that 100% of the data is correct, and I do need everybody to please bug report anything that you see that's wrong. I can't emphasize that enough. And if people are interested, I'm also looking for other people who would like to contribute to the project. So if you want to help maintain the software, even if it's just editing the data files, then uh, let, get in contact with me, and I'll allow you to do pushes to the GitHub. It,
So with this being version 2 and it looking fairly well fleshed out already, how long do you think it'll be until version 1 is sort of sunset officially?
I think I'm going to put Ladrin and Ladrin Chaos Master into version 1, which I haven't done yet. And once those are in, I think that's point it's not going to be maintained anymore. So it will be sitting at where the game currently is at the moment at update 68, and it won't be progressing beyond there. So it will be version 2 or for any new features from that point onwards.
So if you're using the builder today, download version 2, start to get used to it, maybe start transitioning some of your builds over. It's
Mm.
probably a good time.
Yes, and file those bug reports.
Awesome. Well, Matrim, I want to thank you again on behalf of the community. I mean, I know I use this tool all the time. I know many others do as well. Um, I know some folks do their own individual write-ups to capture how to play certain builds, but this has been such a huge time saver for me. It's been great for the community as a way to share builds. I think if I were to make a wish list of things that the DDO dev team could do, it would be to take your build files and allow someone to import them into the game to level up their character based off of a build file. I think that'd be really cool.
That would be quite interesting to do. Um, I think I've also vaguely heard rumors that there's the other development team that do that thing that actually hooks into the software itself and can download your bank content and things. So it might be a case where that could actually produce files for this, because ideally I want to have a banking option in here, so you'd have a bank of all your items. So you could just list character A has got this in his bank, character B's got this in his bank in this software, and then you could say, oh, who's got this item? And say, oh, you need to go to this character, and it's in his and his and it's in his TR cache, or it's in this. So you can actually keep them in track. So you'll be able to track where all your items are. But getting that data into it would probably be a pain in the butt for the users. So if there was an export option from that to this, that would be useful. But it's linking all these kind of things up and getting in touch with the relevant developers.
Yeah, the Trove, with the autofilers or autofiler autofollow tool,
Yeah.
those have been really great to use.
So I mean, if they had one that exported the gear, I could probably allow myself to be able to display it as an options as to where it is and allow you to search it and things like that. So these are things that could happen if we were to link up.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, well, I'm sure you're going to get lots of questions. So, what I'll do is in the stream, I'll go ahead and link to the forum post as well as the GitHub. And obviously, if you want to reach out to Maetrim, they're pretty active on the forums. Um, if somebody wanted to find you in game, what kind of character would they find you on?
Generally speaking, there's only two characters I play online. There's Ma- Maetrim directly, who's my main, and my other character is just called Ordinary. So you could mail either of those directly or send a tell to either of them. If I'm online on Canis, it's probably one of those two characters that I will be on. You can send me a mail in game and I can pick them up occasionally, but this is on Canis server only. Um, if you wanted to find me outside of the game, Discord wise, if I'm online, I can usually be found in Brackart's Discord. And if he's streaming, I can usually be found in his streams. So you can contact me there as well.
Is there still a Discord for the builder tool? I think there was at one time, right?
He Brackart put a particular uh, text only section in for the builder into his Discord. So, but I don't have my own Discord server, so it's you can't get to contact me like that.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, hopefully at least a couple folks out there are feeling industrious, and if you want to help continue this project, please reach out to Maetrim. And Maetrim, thanks for all you do, man. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, and that'll do it for this week's episode of Fixer Upper. Thanks for joining, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Have a great week.